Welcome to the broadcast. Brother Eric John Phelps with you today. You're a 24/7 World Radio podcast on this most beautiful Thursday, on this August 22nd, 2024, coming from the bustling metropolis of Newmanstown, Pennsylvania. So here we preach the true gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, and we also expose the Jesuit order. And I have my most erudite assistant in this matter, and he is Brother George Widger. He usually is on once a week, usually Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, sometimes Friday. So, Brother George, welcome to the broadcast.
Well, thank you. As always, it's a pleasure to be on with you, brother.
It's always a pleasure to have you. Always teach me something, bring some new information that I find extremely valuable. So, appreciate all your work, brother.
Well, I've said this before I get into my scripture verse. When you say that, it's just like, if I had a time machine, giving Ludwig van Beethoven advice on how to write a symphony. So, Ludwig, I understand you're working on your fifth. How does that intro go? Da 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 da. Actually, I don't think that'll work. You might want to redo that.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good, George. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what do you have for us today, my brother?
Okay, so my scripture verse is Ephesians 5, verses 1 through 5. Ephesians 5, verses 1 through 4 or 5, or thereabouts. Okay. Be ye therefore followers of God, as dear children, and walk in love, as Christ hath loved us, and hath given himself for us an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet smelling savor. But fornication and all uncleanliness or covetousness, let these not be named among you, as becometh the saints. Neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor jesting, which are not convenient, but rather giving of thanks. Okay, well, I'll just stop there. I mean, I could go on for a few more verses. Okay, so the verse I like to accentuate is verse 4. Neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor jesting, which are not convenient, but rather giving of thanks. And I had to admit, I've been guilty of this admonition on more than one occasion. I like to keep things as light as possible. I like to inject a little bit of levity in our presentations and in life in general. However, it's one thing to make observations, such as to point out the absurdities or the incongruities of a certain situation or policies or whatever, but it's another thing to be vulgar, to be crude.
Right, and we don't do that.
Yes.
So Christian, the Bible-believing born-again man does not do that. His speech is with grace seasoned with salt, that he may know how to rightly answer every man. However, we do have some levity from time to time, which is part of our Christian joy, to be able to look at a situation that everybody's in terror of, and we can not worry about it, but maybe even make light of it, like Blaise Pascal made light of the Jesuit order in his provincial letters. So there's a place for godly comedy, if you want to put it that way. And I believe it's part of the Christian joy, but it's not foolish talking. Okay, it's not foolishness.
Well, yes. Now, you can go from one extreme to another, to where you have no joy, no happiness, and you can be glum, and you can fit the false stereotype of the Puritans, in that the perception that most people have of them is there were perpetual wet blankets and killjoys, and they thought it was a sin to smile or to laugh.
Yeah, that's all Jesuit history of the Puritans. It's totally wrong. You have one of the greatest poets, John Milton, who was the Secretary of State for Cromwell. He writes Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained. I mean, you have brilliant men that have the whole gamut of the emotion of mankind. These are the Puritans. So they had to wreck the history of the Puritans so that no one would ever want to go back to that, because if you have men like that and women like that would arise, the Jesuits would be set back. Go ahead, brother.
Well, something we've been doing for the last couple of months is I talk about senior U.S. officers who died. When I say senior officers, at least 05 or 06 generals, major generals, and so forth, who died under mysterious circumstances. Well, continuing that theme is I had never heard of him. Had you ever heard of Major General Paul Wolvener Newgarden?
Never have, George.
Okay, I'd imagine. Oh, if you haven't, I imagine most of your audience hasn't either. So his dates were the 24th of February, 1892, to July the 14th, 1944. So he was 52 years old at the time of his death. He was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, he was of German descent, probably Prussian. I'm just guessing. So his name was anglicized. So it's probably, I'm guessing, Neugarten. So for obvious reasons, they changed it. And I realized that his lineage is purely coincidental. So he died in a plane crash in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, I'm just simply presenting facts, and I'll just leave it to your audience to draw their own conclusions. And of course, I'm sure you'll draw your own conclusions. Now, it is entirely possible it was a legitimate accident.
Well, we always have to start from that presupposition that it was an accident, and then examine the facts, and that if otherwise indicated, we have to conclude that this is a series of coincidences, or there was a conspiracy involved for the killing of this individual based upon these facts. But go ahead, George.
Okay, so I really don't have anything else to offer in that he had a fairly exemplary record. I don't know if he was a Freemason or anything like that. But there again, with these other deaths, it said, hey, was he not following orders? Was he talking? Was he violating the chain of command? Who knows?
Who knows? I mean, that's why the Jesuits have this apparatus in place to keep the officers in line. And it's been there for 100 years. And it's not only here, that was in Germany and Great Britain and France. Any of these generals or admirals that want to begin to seriously do the right thing, they just happen to disappear or get court-martialed or whatever. And I have the 4 DVD set called Sacrificing Liberty. And it shows you the high admirals that were involved in the cover-up of the truth of the Israeli attack on the USS Liberty. And the one really behind it, which was LBJ, and I just take it one step further to show that LBJ was run by Francis Cardinal Spellman, who put him in office in 1963. So we have the reality that officers are killed. There was one Israeli pilot who refused to bomb the Liberty, and he had to go into hiding, and he told his story to a particular U.S. congressman. And ultimately, one of the rabbi that was involved with him got him to recant, and he was taken from a high security prison and then just disappeared, probably taken out and taken to Israel and maybe killed, who knows. But here was an honest Jewish pilot, Israeli pilot, who refused to bomb and strafe the USS Liberty and really paid for it with his life. All the others who were involved kept their mouths closed and carried out the conspiracy. And the leading admirals were, one of them was John McCain Sr., who was in charge of the fleet at the time. So no wonder his son was such a traitor, but yeah.
Okay, so just for clarification, I think we talked about this years ago. There have been 4 John Sidney McCains. The third one is probably the most famous one. He later became senator from Arizona, and he was a 2008 Republican nominee for president. So you had John Sidney McCain, the first, the second, the third, and the fourth. The 2 oldest ones went by Jack. The senator went by John. And the fourth one, who's still alive, the Senator McCain's son, goes by Johnny. So just thought I throw that out there. And it's funny. Well, it's not funny that you mentioned the McCain crime family, if you will.
That's right. The Masonic McCain crime family serving the Pope.
And of course, Johnny and at least two of his siblings. Well, Johnny and one of his brothers, Jimmy, I think, went to Brophy High School in Phoenix, Arizona, which is a Jesuit. And their sister, I forgot her name. She was on a talk show host. She also went to a Jesuit high school. Anyhow, but it's funny you should mention the Liberty. No, it's not funny. So that took place in June 1967, the 8th, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Okay. This is something you and I talked about, I believe, yesterday. For those who don't know, Brother Eric and I will usually talk at least once a week off air for a few minutes to trade notes, bounce ideas off of each other, and I'll ask him questions because I'm still learning. So the Liberty, that took place, as I said, in June 1967, so just before the Summer of Love. And that's another conversation altogether. Well, you're talking 7-8 months later, on January the 23rd, 1968, the USS Pueblo was captured off the coast of North Korea.
You're breaking up a little bit, George. Just try to slow down a little bit. Pronounce your words a little better, okay? That's the USS Pueblo.
Oh, Pueblo, yes. Okay. So the USS Pueblo was captured off the North Korean coast on January 23rd, 1968. And the skipper of the Pueblo was Lloyd.
Let's not forget, in international waters.
Well, that is in dispute even now of where they are.
Oh, okay.
According to North Koreans, there were like less than 12 nautical miles from the North Korean coast. The people on the survivors from the Pueblo says no, they're more than 12 miles away. And by the way, I just need to make a distinction. I said 12 nautical miles. Do you know the difference between a nautical mile and a statute mile?
No, I don't, George.
Well, a nautical mile is about 6,000 feet, and give or take a few feet. A statute mile is 5,280 feet. So there's like over 700 feet difference. So that would pencil out to like roughly 13 statute mile, 11 or 13. I forget. You can tell I went to school in California. But
my wife tells me. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So we have this great difference between a nautical mile and a regular mile. And so are they saying that they were 12 nautical miles off the shore or 12 terra firma miles?
Well, that's in dispute. According to the North Koreans, they're less than 12 nautical miles away. According to the crew members from the Pueblo, they're more than 12 miles away. But regardless, the whole thing was a stage event.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Just like the attack on the Liberty.
Okay. So you may be wondering, who was the skipper on the Pueblo? Well, his name was Lloyd Bucher, Bucher. And he grew up in Catholic orphanages, I guess, in the 1930s. And he was actually at Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because they actually made a movie about it in 1937 with Spencer Tracy and Mickey Rooney.
See, both good Catholics.
Yes. And Spencer Tracy was actually trained by the Jesuits.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, his longtime mistress was Catherine Hepburn. Now, he never married her.
Well, she was another Roman Catholic too.
Yes, she was.
It says Roman Catholic morality. Hollywood is Roman Catholic morality at its finest. Mm-hmm.
So yes. So anyhow, so I said Bucher, or Bucher, Bucher, went to Catholic orphanages and was actually a devout Roman Catholic. So
here
I
we
guess
have
on the
a Roman
23rd,
Catholic commander of a spy ship, of an intelligence gathering ship, that told his crew to stand down. Right, George?
correct. And so just for clarifications, his dates, Booker's dates were the 1st of September, 1927, and he died on January 28th, 2004. So he was 76 at the time of his death. So it wasn't that old. So it is. There's some negotiations. Only one. Okay, the Pueblo had a complement of about 80 men or so, and one was actually killed, I guess, when the North Koreans boarded their vessel, and they were taken into, the rest of the crew was taken into captivity, and they're released on the 23rd of December of that year. So they spent almost all of 1968 in a prison camp. And so the whole thing, as I said, was a complete setup. It was a stage event. Now, I don't
A
understand.
complete setup, and I would like to add this, is that there was no threat of nuclear war if this government would have gone in to get those guys. Because we know airborne nuclear war is a hoax.
Mhm.
And China allegedly had nuclear devices. They detonated them, but they had no delivery system. So don't tell me that China was going to help North Korea to fight a war with the United States. It's all nonsense. Because the press has built up in the minds of the American people the invincibility of the Chinese communists and the Russian communists. And that was very high at that time in 1968. So therefore, we're going to abandon these men. We're not going to go get them. We're not going to tell North Korea, you're going to let these guys go in 24 hours, or we're going to bomb your capital city and we're going to invade you. Because that's what Cromwell would have done. So more agitation, more making the American people afraid of communism. They just had the Cuban Missile Crisis, in 1962. So 6 years later, we have the Pueblo Crisis. So I tend to think it was magnifying the bogus Cold War, magnifying the invincibility of communist countries, China, whatever. And there was no reason that I know of why they would deliberately have sacrificed that intelligence ship unless they wanted to give high-tech intelligence to North Korea, which in turn would share that with Red China and bring them up to snuff on high technology when it comes to intelligence. It's a gift.
Well, you actually stole my punchline.
Oh, I'm sorry, George.
Well, you said,
I repent.
well, when you have no facts, sometimes, okay, I know you tend to overindulge me, because that was the next point I was going to say, because the only thing I can think of is that the whole thing was a ruse so that they can hand over the North Koreans American technology.
That's right. And it's during the time, what year was this, George?
1968. So this is right before the Tet Offensive.
Right before the Tet Offensive. So we got Nam going right before the Tet Offensive. So they can give all this high technology to the North Koreans, who will give it to the North Vietnamese to further thwart any sort of victory in Vietnam by American forces. Not to even mention the refusal to bomb Haiphong Harbor or to mine it, which would have ended the war in a couple of months. But go ahead, George.
Okay, but that wasn't part of the big picture. Now, it's funny you should mention the Western press. Whether you're talking,
You mean the Pope's Western press? Is that what you mean?
yes. Thank you for the correction and clarification. Okay, so whether you talk about print forms, magazines, newspapers, or electronic, radio, television, BBC, ABC, CBS, New York Times, Washington Post, whatever, they're all the same. They all have the same paymasters.
That's
And they all pretty. Now, some of them may be allowed to sound a little bit more reasonable. There's the pseudo conservatives like Fox News and things like that. But anyhow, in order to have these Operation Mockingbird assets, they need to be trained. And most of them have at least an undergrad degree. And they'll specifically go to a school of journalism. For example, one such place is the University of Oregon Eugene School of Journalism and Communication. So you had to be the current. I have my notes right here. The current director, or rather the current dean of the journalism department, is a lady by the name of Courtney Munther, Munther. Previously, she had been the communication director for Providence Healthcare and St. Joseph's Healthcare, both of which are Catholic hospital chains.
So here's a Catholic girl working for a hospital chain, and now
correct.
she's in publication and communication, acting as a censor and to teach the others that are coming up how to properly report the news. And remember that these high news agencies, ABC, CBS, NBC, all of them, are all represented on the Council on Foreign Relations. And the Council on Foreign Relations in New York City is overseen by the Archbishop of the political capital of the world, as he was called by Pope John Paul II, which is the cardinal there in New York. He oversees the banking, the communication, this Council on Foreign Relations, advised by the Knights of Malta and others. And he's the most powerful cardinal, the most powerful prince of the church in the country.
Okay, so I just told you who's in charge of the School of Journalism at the University of Oregon, Eugene. But I'd just like to talk about some of the other professors who teach there. One of whom is Dana Chapman, Chtman. She got her undergrad degree from St. Mary's College in La Moraga, California, which is Catholic. She specifically focuses on Black issues. She's a Black woman.
Oh, well, she's a Black woman. She's going to be pro-Black, anti-white. There's no such thing as being objective for these Blacks. If you're trying to be objective like Thomas Sowell, then you're going to be called Uncle Tom. So they always have to be radical, left-wing, socialist, communist, anti-white, pro-Black, rhetoric-spouting individuals that are not reasonable and don't want to abide by the facts that are provable. Go ahead, George.
Okay, so one of the other professors is Christopher Chavez. Previously, he'd been a journalism professor at St. Louis University.
And St. Louis University is what, George?
Jesuit.
So here's a Hispanic Roman Catholic now. And what's his name? Chavez?
Christopher Chavez, yes.
Christopher Chavez. So here's Hispanic Roman Catholic, another soldier in the Pope's army within his Holy Roman 14th Amendment American Empire that is disfranchising all the people. Yep.
Okay, so, and just for laughs, I thought I'd throw out a couple other names who are professors at this school. You have Max Foxman.
A Jew. Right? Foxman is a Jew.
Oh.
Like Abraham Foxman of the ADL years ago. Foxman is a Jewish name.
Oh, okay. So, and I have no idea if he's any relations.
Mm-hmm. Well, Abraham Foxman was a Knight of Malta. He was really a Roman Catholic, and my late friend Barry Chambers said that the ADL was set up to create anti-Jewish fury. And lo and behold, that's what it does if you examine the facts.
Okay. So another professor in the School of Journalism at University of Oregon, Eugene, is Alex Cohen.
Another Jew. And so he's a dean, you say? So here's what, George?
So Alex is actually just a professor.
Okay, he's a professor. He's a Jewish professor. Remember, the Jews are the most intelligent, brilliant people in the world. And when they put their intelligence to work for evil, they really supplement the Satan's mystery of iniquity using the Roman papacy, because they're all working for the Pope. So yeah, okay, got it?
All right. So anyhow, and just speaking of, I'd like to bring up a couple of current event items, and specifically a couple of obituaries. One was Philip John Donahue, who lived from the 21st of December, 1935 died on August the 18th of 2024. So just a few days, 4 days ago. So he was 88 years old.
Thank God he's gone, and he's gone to his place that all the radical, God-hating, Reformation-hating, lying, deceiving Irish Catholics go to. Yep. Thank God he's gone. I'm going to have a glass of wine with that tonight with my wife. I'm going to celebrate.
Okay, so just for good measure, he was educated K through 12 through Catholic schools in Ohio. He also went to John Carroll Prep School in just outside of Cleveland, and he got his undergrad degree from Notre Dame.
Wonderful. Then he was a good friend of, it was Theodore Hesburgh. He probably worshipped him. So it's like Condoleezza Rice went to Notre Dame. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense. They put him through their schools to get him good and brainwashed with their military teaching that this is a war against white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Western civilization, and then they put them in places of power, and they can spew off their hatred and propaganda on their little talk shows like Donahue had. I mean, that guy could really anger me. But it's just typical. Just like another little Roman Catholic called Geraldo Rivera. He's just like Donahue, an agitator, anti-white, a racial Jew, yet Roman Catholic by religion, and ceaseless in his agitation, just as Donahue was.
I'm sorry, are you talking about Jerry Rivers?
Yeah, Jerry Rivers. Rivers.
So he actually, so if I'm not mistaken, he had a Catholic father, Jewish mother, and his mom was a Puerto Rican Catholic, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so now it's interesting to share a couple things about Donahue, Phil Donahue. His second wife was Marlo Thomas, that girl, the daughter of Danny Thomas.
Yep.
Now, also for what it's worth, I mean, he has some interesting Donahue. Okay, so why do I bring him up other than the fact that he just died? Well, he was the first host of the nationally syndicated talk show, daily talk show. Yes, there have been night talk shows like Johnny Carson, Jack Parr, and various other figures, but he was the first one to do it in the daytime. Mm-hmm. So without Donahue, you don't have Oprah or Jerry Springer or people like that. Now,
every last one of them is a leftist, socialist, communist, progressive, quote unquote. Every last one of them working for the Pope,
or was in Jerry Springer's case. However, it's interesting. In 1980, he actually had Robert Mendelsohn on his program, and Mendelsohn was talking about the dangers of child vaccinations because he had just come out with his book Confessions of a Medical Heretic, and Donahue was fairly charitable to him.
Good. Well, he couldn't refute anything that brilliant Jewish doctor said, and his book is a classic. I recommend it for all my listeners. Confessions of a Medical Heretic by Robert Mendelsohn, who suddenly died at the young age of 63, and his family believes he was murdered. But go ahead, Brother George.
Okay, so I guess that basically wraps up the whole section on the the journalism school at University of Oregon, Eugene. And why do I keep saying that? Because there are different schools, University of Oregon. There's University of Oregon at Portland. So I need to make that distinction. But the school at Eugene is considered to be the flagship campus for the state of Oregon. Just thought I'd make that clarification.
And we have to remember Oregon now. Remember the Jesuits they set up reductions in Oregon as they did in South America. And they set them up for the American Indians. However, the American Indians were of a tougher blood than the Guarani Indians of South America. And they walked off the reductions. They wouldn't be there. They wouldn't stay there. So that frustrated the Jesuits. So they fomented their or the Great Plains to kill the Indians. And one of the ways to do it is they had their buffalo hunters shoot every last buffalo they could shoot to starve the Indians. So that's Jesuit vengeance for not staying on the reductions that they had set up in Oregon. Go ahead, brother.
Well, it's funny you say you occasionally will pick up something new from me, but I always learn something every time I'm on with you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Hopefully, I can add something to your repertoire, George.
Oh, well.
Yeah, and the American Indians, I never call them Native Americans. That's nonsense. Russell Means never called them Native Americans. They're American Indians. He said, I'm an American Indian. I'm not a Native American. And so the American Indians, to this day, hate the Catholic Church. And they hate the priests because the priests would plunder their sacred burial grounds for gold. And that Father Junipero Serra, that Dominican, was a thief, stealing gold wherever he could along the west coast of California with his missions, quote unquote. So the American Indians today hate them for good reason of what was done to their forebears by the papacy and the priests.
Well, that reminds me. I realize you made a name for yourself, so to speak, with Vatican assassins. And so that's like, and of course, you've done numerous broadcasts of the reductions in South America. And it wasn't just in Paraguay. It was in Argentina and Brazil and perhaps other places.
Ecuador, yep.
Yes, Ecuador. So just for your clarification, so I know this is a cliche, at least for Americans, that most of us were taught in school that in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Okay, but what they didn't tell us is that his brother, I forgot his name, was actually a Dominican priest who was actually on one of the ships. So one of the purposes for that journey was to bring Catholicism to what they called the New World, or what they thought was the New World. Well, they basically, Columbus only landed in the Caribbean, and basically,
right. His filthy feet never touched America.
Correct.
That's why we should never have Columbus Day here, thanks to the Knights of Columbus.
Yes. So they basically his journeys were confined to the Caribbean, to basically what is now Cuba and a few other, Dominican Republic.
Antigua. I told you the story about the black minister I met there. He was a Baptist minister. And he was giving us a tour of the island. Nehemiah Cox, that was his name. Nehemiah Cox. Very well-spoken black man, preacher, very colorful personality. He brought us to the harbor there in Antigua. And he said, this is where Christopher Columbus, the pirate, came in to be a pirate here in Antigua. And I said, how did you know that? I said, it took me years to find out that Christopher Columbus was a pirate. He said, we all know it here in Antigua. I'll never forget that day. Yeah.
Okay, so forgive me for bringing in the boring history stuff yet again. So for those who don't like history, they can go ahead and tune out for the next few minutes, because I know I would. So anyhow, Christopher Columbus basically confined his activities to the Caribbean. He did not. He really didn't land in North America proper, what would become the United States or Central America or South America. As a matter of fact, prior to about the year 1600 or so, there were virtually no Europeans in what we now call South America.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, prior to that, in terms of the Catholic influence, you basically had the Franciscans and the Dominicans that were in the Caribbean, Central America, and what would become the United States and Canada as well. But since South America was basically untouched until about the year 1600, that became almost the exclusive territory of the Jesuits. They dominated.
Right. Because they started setting up their reductions in 1609.
Okay, so anyhow, so I just need to bring that up for clarification.
It's about the time the Spanish king is going to be expelling the Moors out of Spain. It's about the same time. Mhm.
Okay, so we're done with the boring history stuff, so people can start listening again. Okay, so anyhow, I did have a point. So they're called their camps, basically, if you will, in South America, reductions, as you said numerous times, as you talk about in your book, uh, Vatican assassins. But they realized that for some reason that had a negative reputation, so they decided to call it. They continue the concept, but they just simply change the name. One of which is reservation, which they'd used for the American Indians in the United States starting in the 19th century.
That's
Uh,
right.
Also, in the 1960s, in Vietnam, or what was then South Vietnam, they call them strategic hamlets.
Strategic hamlets. Is that what you say?
Correct.
Hamlets. In Israel, they call them kibbutzes.
Um,
Yep.
and so that basically, so that was done actually. That actually started under Kennedy, but it really took off under Lyndon Johnson, like 1964, 1965. So the purpose was the whole rationale or argument, if you will, was to bring in the local South Vietnamese and to differentiate between those who are the good guys and the bad guys, the communists or pro-communist and versus the regular South Vietnamese. Well, the whole thing was a complete ruse. It was a complete psychological operation because,
It was a
because the vast majority.
justification. It was a justification to divide the country so they could kill each other, destroying the best Vietnamese manhood that happened to be the enemy of China. So if the Jesuits were in control of China by no later than 1949, and they wanted to build China, why doesn't it make sense to kill the manhood of other Asian nations that would be their enemies? And that's exactly what happened. I believe something like 4 or 5 million Vietnamese were killed in that whole crusade against Vietnam, led by the papacy and its American presidents that are controlled.
Okay, so the South Vietnamese officer who is charged with the task of implementing the strategic hamlet program. Okay, I'm probably going to butcher his name. Was known as Pham Thao, Thao, Pham Pham Thao. So his dates were he lived from the 14th of February 1922, died on July the 17th, 1965. So he was 43 years old. So he was a colonel working in conjunction with the CIA who implemented this program in the South. Yes, he had a bunch of U.S. Advisors who told him, who basically told him what to do.
Yeah,
But he grew up in a
how to
strict
conduct the crusade. They told him how to conduct the crusade. That's right.
yes,
Under that filthy pig, Diem.
yes.
Yep.
So Tao actually grew up a devout Roman Catholic. As a matter of fact, he considered entering the seminary, but the Jesuits probably said, "Sorry, fam, we think you can serve us better wearing in the army."
Wearing a uniform. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so they.
And remember, brother, Dan Lyons was the American Jesuit who advised the American generals in Vietnam, like Kirby Abrams and Westmoreland. They were both advised by Jesuit Dan Lyons. And I have a book on him. Dan Lyons, the traveling priest, something like that. It's on my shelf here. But he was the man of power from the order to oversee that the American military heads were doing what they're supposed to do, namely losing the war and never winning. Go ahead.
Okay, and I know I mentioned this before, so forgive me for repeating myself. Both Abrams and Westmoreland were Roman Catholics. Westmoreland was a convert to Catholicism. There's also a Knight of St. John of Jerusalem.
Was Abrams not a multitude?
That I've not been able to confirm, but it would not surprise me.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either.
So, so if you think about this, if you look at all these conflicts that the United States has been involved with last 80 years, i.e., since World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, they're basically these conflicts went on for at least years, if not decades. How long does it take to engage in these battles? I mean, they should be. You're not talking about that much territory. I mean, gee, if I didn't know any better, the the people who were running these wars didn't want to win.
That's right. That was the purpose of the Catholics in Action, CIA, to draw it out, to weaken America, to further bankrupt it, to further cause the agitation of these wars among the population, get them distracted, get them frustrated, so ultimately we can bring them into, namely the whites, into our new right. Yeah. And after watching that pro-black, anti-white Democratic National Convention, it's clear the camps are two. One is a white camp with the Republicans, and the other is a black camp with the Democrats. As a guy, they split the country racially, and now they're getting ready for their civil war when they put Trump in office, and that will facilitate martial law and the roundups. That's how I see it. But the end game is no doubt the new right to be imposed. As the great Martin Lee wrote in his book, The Beast Awakens.
Okay, well, I believe in truth in advertising. I've not watched any of the Democrat convention. I've seen some clips of it, but maybe my stomach lining isn't that strong. And so if you think about it, the way things stand right now, if you look at the four leading candidates for president, vice president, on both sides, Rome runs them all. And I know we've got to, do you mind if I just do a quick review?
Sure, and I just want to add this before you do that. As I watched all these displays of religion, because they don't have anything to do with the facts, but they were quoting, you might want to notice here that there was not one Democratic speaker, not one, who's talked about the faked assassination attempt of Trump. Not one. There was a Democrat woman, her name was Joy, I can't remember her last name. She was on CNN, I believe. And they removed her for, I believe it was racism. Of course, she was, of course, a black racist, hating white people. But she came out just recently after the Trump bogus assassination attempt, and she said it was faked. That was the end of her journalistic career. I can't find her anywhere anymore. This Joy Reid, is that her name? Joy Reid? First name is Joy.
Okay, perhaps. I'm sorry, I wasn't familiar with that. Okay, so just as a quick review, runs all four candidates. So on the Republican side, you have Donald Trump for president, and his vice presidential candidate is J.D. Vance. Vance is a Roman Catholic. He's a convert to the Catholic Church. Donald Trump is ostensibly evangelical, whatever that is. He is of a Presbyterian and Lutheran background. But two of his three wives are one is currently Catholic, and at least one of his ex-wives is Catholic. He went to Fordham for 2 years, and at least three of his children were educated by the Jesuits. His daughter Tiffany got her law degree from Georgetown. Eric got his got his undergrad degree from Georgetown, and he's also on the board of trustees, as is Paul Pelosi Sr. Yes, Nancy's husband.
So the Trump who are enemies with the Pelosi's are mutual trustees at Georgetown Jesuit University. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct. Well, Paul may have retired, but he was on the board of trustees there. His daughter Ivanka spent 2 years at Georgetown before she transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, which is what she got her degree from the Wharton School of Business. Now, Donald Trump himself did 2 years at Fordham from 64 to 66 before he transferred to University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. So
Philadelphia is a Roman Catholic town. Roman Catholic black.
Correct. Now, his sister, Mary Ann Trump, was a convert to Catholic Church. She also, when she was alive, she gave something like $3 or $4 million to Sacred Heart University in Connecticut. And
whenever, dear listener, whenever you hear the word Sacred Heart, that little phrase is a creature of the Jesuit order.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's talk about the Democrat side. The current vice president and the leading presidential nominee is Kamala Harris. Even though she professes to be a Baptist, she's about as Baptist as the Pope. She went to Notre Dame High School in Montreal, Canada. She gave, back in 2009, she gave the commencement address at University of San Francisco, which is Jesuit. Also,
slow down, George.
Okay.
She gave the commencement address at the University of San Francisco?
Correct.
Jesuit University? So that means that she had ins with Pelosi even then, because the president of the University of San Francisco, I think it was named, what was it, Prinkett? He was, what's that?
Stephen J. Privet, S.J.?
Yeah, Stephen J. Privet, S.J. He was a president of University of San Francisco, and he's the one who gave the opening speech for Nancy Pelosi when she became the Speaker of the House. So here's a connection with Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris through the Jesuits of the University of San Francisco.
Now, her vice presidential running mate is Tim Walz. He is currently the governor of Minnesota.
Yeah, Tim Walz, W-A-L-Z, right? We have to talk a little slower, George. Tim Walz.
Well, okay, thank you. So even though he's ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, which means absolutely nothing. Because, as I said a couple weeks ago, the presiding bishop, which is basically the head of the ELCA, is Elizabeth Eaton. And she has been to the Vatican at least once to have an audience with the current Pope Francis.
Her name is Elizabeth Eaton, you say?
Correct.
Eaton is a very high American family. It's a very wealthy American family, and I wonder if she's related in it.
Oh, okay. Perhaps.
Like Cyrus Eaton, big CFR member.
Okay.
Secret Society member. Yeah, go ahead, George.
Okay. Also, Tim Balls has a master's degree from St. Mary's University in Minneapolis, which is a Catholic school.
So he went there as a non-Roman Catholic to get his master's degree, and then later converted to Catholicism after reading the works of the satanic devil Thomas Aquinas. Great.
No, I think you're conflating Tim with JD.
Oh, that's right. That's JD.
JD.
Yeah, he converted after reading Thomas Aquinas.
Correct. So who knows? Tim just hasn't got around to converting over to the Catholic Church, but I'm sure he will eventually. But well, maybe.
Probably doesn't even have to. As long as he's serving the Jesuits, they don't care if he's Catholic or not. Just you're serving the Brotherhood. That's all that matters. Like Billy Boy Clinton. Like Bill Clinton, he's not Catholic, but he absolutely served the Jesuits his entire political life. He spoke at the Democratic National Convention last night. He looks terrible. Weak voice, old, frail, doddering old man. It looks terrible. Yeah.
Well, okay, you're not saying that as sinful as decades of fornication and adultery have had a negative impact on his overall health?
I would think that would. Because, you know, when you're busy with fornication, you contract every pathogen that individual has. And that lowers your immune system. And then you go to somebody else, you get all their pathogens, and that further lowers your system. So you have a immune deficiency. And now we get to have what we will call AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And you get that through a multitude of sexual partners that are infecting and reinfecting each other. Yep.
Well, and of course, you know, the talking points on the communist media is that anybody who says anything critical about Kamala Harris is obviously a sexist, bigoted, misogynist, chauvinist pig, and is racist as well, because we're on the cusp of possibly installing the first. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what her ethnic background is. Whatever she is.
East Indian and black. Her
Oh,
father
okay.
was Jamaican and her mother was from East India. But for her, she's all black and she's a victim of white on black racism.
Well,
Ringing that
even
bell.
though she does have Irish, even though she does have Irish blood in her, and actually on her father's side, the Irish owned slaves in Jamaica. So I think she should pay reparations to black people in this country.
No, that George, it's all the obvious white people's fault. And anybody with any color whatsoever is virtuous as a driven snow. They never did anything wrong, and they were always victims of the evil and wicked white men. And that's the socialist, communist shibboleth of today, in spite of the facts that disprove that. But go ahead.
And of course, I've heard these people, these communists on the radio say, well, how dare they, they question her background or her competence to be vice president or senator or any other office she's held. She's eminently qualified to be president of the United States. Just ask Willie Brown.
Just ask Willie Brown where he brought her into the inner sanctum of his bedroom. And after that, she got her promotion. So, I mean, this is so everywhere. This is Eisenhower had his mistress. Patton had a mistress in Germany. FDR had a Jewish mistress. I mean, all of these guys of power are all busy actively fornicating or committing adultery. That's part of the price you pay to get all the power and wealth and influence. So, it surprises me that, I mean, it's obvious that she did these immoral things, but the real immoral things, in addition to that, are what she had done with the crime bill, and that Joe Biden created it. And then she prosecutes all these blacks with this crime bill to get them thrown in jail. She wasn't helping the blacks. She was enforcing the crime bill. So those facts are never talked about. You just have to have the rah, 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 shish, boom, bop. And she's black and she's a woman and she's pro-sodomite and pro-abortion and pro-murdering your children in the womb. So she's got to be good. Go ahead, George.
Well, I don't mean to be belaboring this topic, but I've seen one of their ads that Tim Walz and Kamala Harris came out with last week or so. And they said, "Hi, I'm Tim Walz. I'm the governor of Minnesota, and we believe in freedom. And we want to do everything we possibly can to protect it here in the United States. So we believe that all Americans should be free from gun violence. And
that's a real clever Jesuit twist. To use it as a means to justify gun confiscation, which would really enhance the power of the military government in Washington."
And they also said in the ad. Now I realize they didn't come up with this. Somebody else wrote this for them. But they said, we also believe in reproductive freedom, that a woman should be free to choose when and how she starts a family, and the government should stay out of her body. Now, when they frame things like that, it sounds almost palatable, because everybody, hey, what's wrong with freedom? What's wrong with liberty? What's wrong with choice?
Right.
They don't say they're pro-abortion. They say they're pro-choice. They support a woman's right to choose.
That's correct. So they twist it. Everybody has a right to be free from gun violence. Therefore, we need to confiscate the guns. Yeah. And you take the guns and the violence will really begin. But go ahead.
So if you want to eliminate, a good way to eliminate poverty is to make sure everybody is dead. So if nobody's alive, you have no poor people.
Or to eliminate poverty, everybody's the same. Like C.S. Lewis wrote in his great book, Screwtape Letters and Screwtape Propose a Toast. Cut them all down to the same level of ciphers. Well, when everybody's equally poor, how then can there be poverty? You have to measure poverty against something. So when they're all equally groveling around in their hovels, there's nobody that's poor because that's all their status is, unless they want to look into another country and see what those people are living like. But this is the beauty of communism, the beauty of Jesuit communism, to reduce every man to the lowest cipher, as C.S. Lewis wrote in his book, Screwtape Letters and Screwtape Propositos.
Well, and of course, and just for clarification, people may be wondering who Clive Staples Lewis was. Well, besides being the author of the aforementioned Screwtape Letters, his most famous work was Mere Christianity. He did others like the Narnia Tales. But just for clarification, and he was a known Freemason.
Yeah, I don't believe he was a Christian man. I don't believe he was truly born again. But, he did say some things that were true. And being a known Freemason, there are, certain Freemasons that have said truthful things, but they're not on our side. Yeah.
Oh, well, here's a trivia question for you. Do you know, he was born on the 28th of November, 1898 in Belfast, Ireland. You know when he died?
No.
Okay, so, well, it's interesting. Both he, John F. Kennedy, and Aldous Huxley all died on November the 22nd, 1963.
Really? Kennedy died November 22nd, 1963, and who else did?
Aldous Huxley of Brave New World, the author of Brave New World, and C.S. Lewis.
Okay. That's intriguing, because that's no coincidence. Just like it's no coincidence that John Adams and Thomas Jefferson died the same day on July 24th, 1826. Died the same day.
You mean the 4th of July?
The 4th of July, 1826. Jefferson.
Jefferson. I'm sorry, I misheard you. I thought you said July the 24th.
July the 4th. Maybe I did. So July the 4th, pardon me.
Oh, okay. So so you're talking about how people perceive things, and perception is everything. And here's a bit of a change things up a bit. A couple of years ago, somebody sent me this video from this woman who was born in Germany, I believe in 1895. She goes by Feely, which is short for Felicity. And I guess she moved to the United States, Ohio in 2016. And so she posts videos on German language, and the German culture, and the differences between the United States and Germany, how things are similar and how things are different. And I probably could spend the remainder of the broadcast just talking about her channel. Now, this is a YouTube channel, and she tries not to be controversial, but occasionally she does. And she said,
if you say anything pro-German, why, you're just another Nazi. Really? When I say something pro-German, like Bach was the greatest musician who ever lived, wasn't he German? Does that mean I'm pro-Nazi? Or we have Kaiser Wilhelm the First, who was involved in kicking the Jesuits out of Germany in 1872. Was he a Nazi? Or the great Otto von Bismarck, who defeated the French at Sedan in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. Was he a Nazi? So they completely erase all the virtuous, wonderful things that the Germans, specifically the German Lutherans, Protestants, accomplished, and paint them with a brush that they're all nothing but a bunch of German-speaking Nazis, so that Germany can continue to be beaten down in every generation of young Germans that arise, that they will learn to hate themselves and loathe themselves, because the German people were the greatest enemy of the papacy and the Jesuit order in the 1800s. Nothing could touch Prussia in its resistance to the papacy, especially Bismarck. So that's what they're doing here with as the propaganda against the Germans here. And by the way, American population was 35% German. The white population was 35% German, which is one of the reasons why we had so many good inventors and high technology and engineering. Because the Germans, I maintain, are the most brilliant of the white race peoples. So when you have them, you're going to have the best guns, the best cars, the best technology. You get rid of them, your country goes down. And that's what they've done here for the last 80 years.
Okay, so Philo, she didn't quite say that, but she conveyed that sentiment. She said, basically, it all had to do. But if you look, say, 100 years ago, the German language had a completely different reputation because it was the number 2 language for science.
And you know why it was the number 2 language for science? Because it was the number 1 or 2 language for theology. The first being English, the second being German.
Okay, if I could just share, do you mind if I share one quick little shaggy dog?
Sure.
Okay, as I said, I got my undergrad degree from Sonoma State University in Rohnert Park. I got that back in 2005. But prior to that, I spent a year at California State University, Sacramento. Why I switched is a different story. It's not very interesting.
George, just slow down. We want to hear your story. So speak clearly and slow down, okay?
Well, you don't want to be presumptuous. I'm not sure if I were in the audience, I'd want to hear my story. So from 2002 to 2003, I spent a year at California State University, Sacramento. And one of the classes I took there was an introductory Latin course, because I thought that'd be useful to know if I'm going to be getting a degree in history. And one of my classmates was a fellow named Michael. And I ran into Michael in the library one day, and I noticed that he was studying German because I saw his textbook. And I was asking him about that. And he said, well, I'm a chemistry major. So in addition to learning Latin, I had to learn German because there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of chemistry books that were written in German that have never been translated in English. Mm-hmm. I said, really? He said, yeah. So if you want to be a chemist, you need to know those 2 languages.
Yeah, chemist, that's right, and also engineering. Because the Germans were the founders of anti-gravity craft and technology. And Schellenberger was the German who was the father of that. And so we can't have anybody reading that stuff now. Of course, we know that's all impossible. But again, their high technology, their excellence in math.
Okay, so getting back to this Philly video where she was talking about the negative reputation that German has. And whenever you see portrayals of it, they're generally speaking, people are speaking it are Nazis, or they're angry, or they're aggressive, or they're mean, or whatever. They're not being friendly, they're not joking around, things like that. So she said, well, why is that? And she said, well, it could have to do that fellow from Austria with a funny mustache.
Who was an Austrian and not German. Yeah.
Yes. So also, unbeknownst to me until I saw this video, is he had to take diction lessons. Maybe I should have taken some. And he was actually trained by an opera singer. I don't recall his name.
Now, are you telling me that Hitler had to take, Schicklgruber had to take speaking lessons?
Yes. And he was instructed in oration by an opera singer, one of the big ones of his day. So when you see those over-the-top speeches where he's saying, in aller dieser Welt ist nur ein Reich, nur ein Volk und nur ein Führer. In all this world, there is one country, one people, one leader.
Yeah.
Deutschland sind das Reich. Deutschland sind das Volk. Und ich bin der Führer.
It's the Democratic National Convention. We're all one people. We love America. When's the last time you heard Democrats say they loved America? We love America. We're all one people, all blacks and whites and everything other in the sun. We're all one race mix, miscegenated hodgepodge of mankind. Yeah. And that's a communist maxim. Race mixing between the blacks and the whites is a communist maxim. You can read about it in Hoover's work, Masters of Deceit, which was not written by Hoover, it was written by some Jesuits. And one of the purposes of the whole communist movement is to forcefully race mix the whites with the blacks to create black supremacy and hence the destruction of the white Protestant peoples of America.
Okay, so basically, getting back to the video and just wrapping it up. So she was saying is almost overnight, or within a matter of years, Adolf Hitler destroyed the reputation of the German language, even though for centuries prior to that, it had a very high reputation in terms of the arts, culture, science, literature, poetry, theology.
Of course, because northern Germany, Prussia area, to the exclusion of Roman Catholic Bavaria, was the greatest nation in the world because of the Reformation. They have Luther Bible. Luther's Bible affected the people, and they became tremendously excellent in all the sciences that they put their hand to. That's a result of reading the Luther Bible, which no Lutheran church reads today.
Anywhere in the world, whether you're talking about Germany or the United States or Sweden or wherever.
Yeah. The Jesuits have successfully supplanted the Lutheran Bible of Luther with these other heresies based on a heretical Jerome's Latin Vulgate Greek text, but yet very few preachers will ever talk about this. But that's the heart and soul of the destruction of Western civilization. And it just kind of grieves me that this German gal leaves that key point out. You can't see the degradation of Germany unless you see the abandonment of the Lutheran Bible and the heresies preached by Christian Ferdinand Bauer at Tübingen University, destroying the Lutheran ministers that will come out of there. They can be infidels, thus right in the hands of the Pope. But go ahead, George. We're about 107 minutes here. If you want to continue on, we can, or just let me know what you want to do.
Well,
1 hour is, pardon me, 1 hour, 7 minutes.
Okay, so by the way, one of your listeners whom I've been in contact with for 5-6 years, John Benson in Johnson County, Kansas.
Amen. How you doing, Brother John? Thank you for all you sent to me. John just sent me a tremendous quotation out of a book titled Super Mob, where it shows these particular Catholics in conjunction with the Jesuits. And one of the big awards that they gave was given to J. Edgar Hoover. So it's in the book Super Mob. I recommend the listeners get it. Thank you, John, for that. Go ahead.
Okay. So the author of that book was Sidney Roy Korshak, who lived.
Yes. Okay, Korshak. Mm-hmm.
Okay. We don't need to talk about his religious background, do we?
I don't think so. I think we can make a point. I mean, if you want to, you can. It's fine.
Oh, well,
John said he was completely, totally entwined with the Jesuits.
Okay. So despite his Jewish background, he decided to get a law degree from DePaul University in Chicago, which is Catholic, but you could say, for all intents and purposes, Jesuit.
Sure.
So his dates were the 6th of June, D-Day, 1907, until January the 20th, 1996. So he was 88 years old at the time of his death. And so I'm doing this at the behest of John because he actually got a hold of me the other day. And he wrote a book called, what was it? Was it Mob Boss?
Super Mob.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Super Mob. Okay, I've not read it yet, but I'm adding it to my hopper. Okay, so he is known as a fixer for the for the Catholic Mafia in Chicago, the outfit. And so some of his, as I said, he got his law degree from DePaul. Mm-hmm. So some of his clients were Al Capone, Frank Nitti, Sam Giancana, Tony Accardo, and Mo Dallas. Now, he later moved to Los Angeles, where some of his clients were MGM Studios, Let's see now. Frank Sinatra, Ronald Reagan, Pat Brown, the father of Jerry Brown, and he also represented the Hilton Hotel, among other places.
With Baron Hilton, the Knight of Malta, who owned him. Yeah.
Yes. Well, he also represented the Hilton Hotel, the Hyatt, the MGM, the Playboy Club, Diners Clubs International, and Jimmy Hoffa.
And Jimmy Hoffa, yeah. I'll bet you he was also connected to Edward Bennett Williams, too.
Well, that I do.
The largest law firm in Washington. Edward Bennett Williams did all of his legal work for the Jesuits in Georgetown for free, for gratis. Edward Bennett Williams, I believe, was the mayor of District of Columbia. And there's a book on him that's titled The Man to See. And that's all about Edward Bennett Williams.
If I'm not mistaken, I had to go look this up. Edward Bennett Williams was also the owner of the then Washington Redskins. They're now called the Commanders.
Yeah, that's right. He owned the Washington Redskins and the another club. Was it
the baseball team, the Baltimore Orioles.
Baltimore Orioles. That's right. Mm-hmm. Because the Knights of Malta are getting all the people over enamored in sports and games, so that these people are not capable of true Republican government and responsibilities of their citizenship. Just make them a bunch of sports fanatics. That's exactly what they pulled on the Guarani Indians in South America on the reductions. They had sports and games and parties and all sorts of things to keep the Indians down from ever thinking about the plight they were really in. Just like here. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's worse because we have more toys and more distractions. We have video games. You can theoretically get hundreds of channels on television. You can watch, you have Netflix and Hulu and all sorts of devices. And you have all sorts of distractions with not just professional sports, but collegiate sports, Olympic sports, tennis, golf, bicycling.
Now you're going to make the Texans mad because the Texans are sports fanatics, particularly football. Football is the god of the state of Texas, and they'll do anything for that. And you start announcing football to the Texan Baptists, you're going to have a problem. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, it's just a preoccupation of your mind. I mean, who cares about football? Go ahead, George. I mean, that's not to say that I didn't love football. I thought Barry Sanders, the Black Barry Sanders, was the greatest running back in history. Put Emmitt Smith and Jim Brown to shame, but the coach of the Detroit Lions refused to play him, and so he just quit. What else could he do? So anyway, there's many interesting stories, but this whole sports fanaticism is intended to take our minds off what is really important, and that's our personal rights, who runs the country, Jesus Christ, the Bible, and other important topics like that.
Well, I know I brought this up to you before, but considering you want to talk about one of the demagogues of the NFL, the godfather of the Super Bowl was Vince Lombardi, the Knight of Malta. He was actually a seminarian, but I guess his priest said, "Hey, Vinny, you probably could better serve us as a coach." Sure. And as I said, he was a Knight of Malta, high-level Freemason. And there's a story, I haven't been able to verify it, but a reporter asked him right after the assassination of JFK, if, well, gee, Vince, we're sorry. I mean, as a Catholic, I'm sure you must be very distraught about, what Lee Harvey Oswald just did to our beloved president. And Lombardi's response is, well, hey, Jack knew what the rules were.
Is that right? Is that what he said? Vince Lombardi said Jack knew what the rules were. Uh-huh. Yeah, because Jack wants to do away with the CIA that was controlled by Francis Cardinal Spellman. Yeah, Jack wants to end the Vietnam War that was called Spelly's War. Yeah, Jack wants to have a printing of United States, what was the silver certificates, nearly 5 billion of them, against the Pope's Federal Reserve notes. So Jack knew the rules, and if he's not going to serve the Pope, well, they'll make an example out of him and shoot him 12:30 in the afternoon in some Protestant town called Dallas, and nobody gets prosecuted except Clay Shaw. They covered it all up. FBI, Hoover's FBI covered it up. So that's what you do. That's what you get when you seriously resist the papacy as a political leader. That's why none of them do it.
So, but if I could just address that, they said, so Coach Lombardi said President Kennedy knew what the rules were. What could he possibly mean by that? I just thought he was a coach.
Oh, no. He was a Knight of Malta just like Joe Kennedy. Joe Kennedy and Vince Lombardi knew each other. So I'm sure they talked. They know the rules.
Okay, so it's just like now, but it's interesting. Vince Lombardi died shortly. 1970. So he was like 54, 55. I have to go look up his dates. So, gee, did he do something wrong?
Who knows?
Who
knows?
So he actually died at Georgetown Hospital. But anyhow,
it tells me he was killed. They did the very same thing to William J. Casey. They killed him in Georgetown Hospital. Yep.
Oh, okay. Because there are certain rules about the Freemasons. I don't know. They're
both knights. They're both Knights of Malta. Casey and Lombardi, both Knights of Malta. They're in Jesuit Georgetown Hospital. So you made a mistake here, and then we're just going to have to terminate you. They'll make it a slow injection, and you'll die suddenly. Just hold still.
Okay, so are you saying they had to terminate him with extreme prejudice?
Of course. Of course. William J. Casey was too big to allow him to talk about anything. So they terminated him. It's like they terminated Joe Kennedy. He was too big to talk about anything.
Well, are you talking about the father?
Yes, the father.
Well, he was like about 80 or so.
Well, they have a way of helping them along. These doddering old men become. I had a CIA agent assassin say to me one time, his name was John. He said, Eric, he says, when we shooters get older, like over 60, they all believe that we start getting a little not right in the head. And that's when they send out their assassins to kill us. The CIA kills their older assassins because they don't want them talking about what they did when their minds start to become weak in their older ages. Do it all the time.
Okay, so that reminds me. I wasn't going to bring. Okay, I say this almost every stream, so forgive me. That's one of my numerous idiosyncrasies. Is I wasn't planning on bringing this up, but I mean, I must.
At least the listeners know we're not canning anything. It's just moving from one topic to the next. I hope it's not completely, disconnected. But go ahead, George.
Okay, so did you ever see the 1972 film with Charles Bronson called The Mechanic?
I believe I did.
Okay, so
the hitman.
Okay, so he's a hitman. So you don't get the impression that a CIA or a contract. Well, he's a contract killer, but you never find out that he's working for the government or anything like that. So he takes on his protege, Jan Michael Vincent, and he shows him the ropes. But so Bronson's character, Arthur Bishop, has a very distinguished career. He always gets his man or people. He blows them up. He shoots them. He makes it look like a heart attack. He makes it look like the brakes fail, whatever. And he's handsomely rewarded. He lives a very lavish lifestyle, drives the best car, drinks the best wine. But for some reason, his handlers aren't happy with it because he made a mistake. So they send him over to Europe, I think Italy, to kill somebody. They do. And but just before they come back to the States, Jan Michael Vincent kills him, kills Charles Bronson's character by poisoning his wine or something. And now, when this movie came out in 1972, Charles Bronson was about 50 or so. So he was not an old man by any stretch of the imagination. But I guess Okay, this is a Hollywood film, but so Jan Michael Vincent kills him, and he comes back to the States, but things don't exactly turn out as you might expect for Michael Vincent's character. He gets a surprise. So, what do you think they're telling us in this movie?
They all work together, George. Whether it's CIA, whether it's mafia, they all work together. Like, for example, William J. Casey, head of the CIA, he was a very personal friend of Albert Vincent Carone. Albert Vincent Carone was in the Gambino crime family, also in the military as an officer. And his daughter, I forget her first name, but when she was married, you have the mob with Carone is in one room, one auditorium, and the other room you have a bunch of CIA officers and CIA guys, but they're separated into different rooms. When in fact we know they both work together. Carone was an Knight of Malta, just like William J. Casey. They all work together, and so hopefully this horrible, terrible reality will sit in with our listeners that there is no them and us. It's them opposing us little guys that don't have any power, money, or wealth. And they get away with pretty much everything they want to do until the Lord's people start praying about it. But go ahead, George.
Okay, so the point is that most of your assassins don't get to retire. They don't get to spend their golden years on a tropical island, in Tahiti or the Bahamas. And so I suppose that aspect of the fact that he became a liability and had to be eliminated is real. But from what I understand, most your killer so what this movie the mechanic does is it reinforces this psyop, this canard, that your assassins are lone wolves. They usually work part of teams.
Yeah. But they're lone wolves, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a big lie. Go ahead.
Okay, so you saw this when a movie came out around that time called The Day of the Jackal.
Yep.
With I'm not talking about the Bruce Willis remake, but I'm talking about the movie with Edward Foxworthy, I think, or Edward Fox, and or other movies. But so that is something that they want the people to accept. It's like the lone wolf is up there with airborne nuclear war.
Yeah, well, they can't advocate what they know to be true, which is a conspiracy. It's all these men working for the papacy have conspired together under the Pope to do what they're ordered to do. It's very simple. That's why the writers of the Declaration of Independence, when such and such train of events, this is a design to reduce us. That's conspiracy talk in the Declaration of Independence. So you can't have anybody believing there are a group of men who work together to reduce your life or whatever status. That's conspiracy theorists, and we all know that's not true. And the moment you realize that it is true, and the greatest conspiratorial operations out of the Vatican, with the Jesuits leading the way, then historical events will begin to open up to you. But only then. Right, Georgia?
Okay, so
I think we're getting close to, we got about, let's say 6 more minutes. We'll stop it.
Okay.
An hour.
So something I'd like to bring up is last week there was a couple of things that took place. The World Health Organization, the WHO, said that there is an outbreak of concern in the Democratic Republic of Congo in Central Africa, saying that there's been a bunch of people being sick with monkeypox, or what they used to call monkeypox. And it's just like, are they trying to pull another fast one on us?
Of course. They run the press, and they run the scientists, and they run the labs, they run all that stuff, and they jive them all together to bring out this warning, we're going to have this again. Like Lost in Space, that goofy little robot, warning, waving his arms everywhere. It's the same exact delusion and redirection that they do all the time.
Well, and something I about looked into, also something that took place last week, was there was a plane crash in Brazil with something like over 60 people on board, 61, and including several doctors. Apparently, I guess they're on their way to a conference where they're talking about the dangers of the shots and why the program needed to be stopped in Brazil. Well, since they're dead, they can't present.
Can't have that, George. You got to keep those people down. It's like one guy I associate with. He was on an airplane with some big wig from Costa Rica or Panama or whatever. And Ted asked him, he said, why is it that you never promote the people so that they can get out of their poverty and have a middle class? And the banker said to him, Gringo, we have them right where we want them. It's called conspiracy. A conspiracy of wealthy, powerful men get together and keep the people down. That's exactly what he said. We have Gringo, we have them right where we want them.
Well, we're coming up on an hour and a half, and I just would like to mention one of the. What other point if I could? Do you remember a music artist named Greg Kihn?
No.
Okay, so he was 75 years old. He died last week. He had a couple of hits back in the 80s. Probably the biggest one was called Jeopardy. Came out in 1983. And I remember watching the video for it, back when they showed videos on NTV. And forgive me for bringing this up, but do you mind if I bring up a couple of pieces of trivia?
Of course, George. That's why I like to have you on the program. Go ahead.
Well, I guess there's yes, Gregory Stanley Kihn was born on the 10th of July, 1949. By the way, that was John Calvin's birthday, a different year, of course. And he died on August the 13th, 2024. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland, which is the hometown of our dear friend Nancy D'Alessandro, aka Pelosi. And I guess in the 1970s.
Alessandro, that Italian Catholic mob name. Go ahead.
Okay, so he died last week on the 13th, or about 9 days ago on the 13th. And his biggest hit was the 1983 song Jeopardy. And they actually did a video for it, which aired on MTV, music television. And even though he's of a Polish Jewish background, I'm just simply stating facts here. Did you catch that?
I'm with you, George. Go ahead. Polish Jewish background. Go ahead.
Well, in the video, which you could watch on YouTube, is filmed at St. Dolores Catholic Church in San Francisco.
Why wasn't it filmed in a synagogue? George, you know the Jews run everything. Why would they film it at a Catholic church or a Catholic school, George?
I don't know. Maybe it's the only venue that was available at the time. Who knows?
Yeah, they're showing you who rules. And the Jews are their servants. Any Jews of power.
Oh, okay. And for what it's worth, Greg Kihn was the most successful American of Polish descent in American music history. Okay, yeah, they're having.
What's his name again, George? You're going real fast and you're choppy. What's his name again, George?
Greg Kihn, Kihn.
Kihn. Sounds like a derivation of Cohen.
Greg. Well, it could be, or it probably could be an anglicized version of Kaczynski or something along those lines.
So you say he's the most successful Jewish American composer? Is that what you said?
Well, Polish American rock musician of Polish descent.
Polish rock musician, I see. Yeah, well, busy serving the Jesuit order with rock and roll.
Yes, and so after he retired as a musician, he became a DJ. So he actually died of Alzheimer's at the age of 75.
Mm-hmm. Which is an infection of the brain and involves parasites and fungus. Kill the parasites and the fungus, the Alzheimer goes away. Okay, George, I think we're done. So let's have some closing remarks and give your contact info and we're good to go.
Okay, so are you saying I've outstayed my welcome?
I had a hard day today, George. I had to cut up 2 big trees and get out here by 2 o'clock. And so anyway, we could go longer, but I think maybe the listeners are getting a little ready for an end. How about that? So go ahead.
Okay, fair enough. So let's start roll the closing credits. And before we bring up the end sign, if people have any questions, comments, concerns, or critiques, they can always email me at georgewidger1969@gmail.com. That is georwidger1969@gmail.com. If people want me to go over a topic again, please let me know. And if I don't get back to you in 24 hours, please try again. I forgot. And after all, I am just a one-man show here.
Well, you did a great job, George. Thank you for being with us. Thanks for your email contact. And this is Brother Eric John Phelps, 24/7 World Radio Podcast. Thanking you for being with us today on this beautiful August the 22nd, 2024, which is a Thursday. And it is beautiful here, by the way. If you appreciate these broadcasts, send your gifts to rbpbdonate@comcast.net, which is the PayPal address, rbpbdonate@comcast.net, or you can send it to Cash App at Eric, E-R-I-C, John, J-O-N, Phelps, P-H-E-L-P-S, or you can send a check, old-fashioned way, to RBT, P.O. Box 306, Newmanstown, Pennsylvania, 17073. The end game of all of this is the salvation of the Lord's elect. Hence we preach the gospel of 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4, how that Christ died for our sins, according to the scriptures, was buried and rose again, commands all men everywhere to repent, Acts 17:30, because he set a day and he's going to judge this world. He's going to judge every man by the person that he has designated, the one having all authority in heaven and earth, his beloved Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. And so I trust you're saved, you believe the gospel, and while we're still here, that you would continue in serving the Lord and reading his word, the AV 1611 Reformation English Bible for English-speaking people in its present edition of 1769. So until we meet again, Lord bless. Maranatha.